Hello and welcome to a Reave build guide. This is going to be for Trickster Reave. I will go over leveling, different weapon types, different scaling, refraction versus base Reave, Vol Reave, soul gain prevention, lockout mechanics, pretty much everything that you would ever have as a discussion point about the Reave in 3.25, at least from the perspective of a Trickster, I'm going to discuss in this video. So for leveling, you pretty much just want to come straight out, grab Trickery, this will give you some strength and some int, and then head over to Master of Blades. You will be leveling with Frost Blades, so any physical damage increase is fine because it's going to convert automatically, and then you can either come down here and blitz for the cold mastery or path over here and then take cold mastery later on. You will pick up the multi-shot and the attack mastery, so that way you can have better clear. While leveling, I would say that coming down here and just doing it this way is fine. Yeah, it's some backtracking, but whatever. It'll get you your convert like way sooner, so that'll just feel comfy, because this elemental mastery doesn't really do that much until you convert everything. So things to think about, I guess. These nodes are all very generic, and it gets you some attack speed early on, so it'll not feel super clunky. And then we are going precise technique while leveling. And then for leveling to maps, what I would suggest is just staying Frostblades, work on getting a Vol Reave, work on leveling up a Reave, work on getting multiple Reaves to have quality as well, so that you can eventually Vol a Reave for the additional 2 max charges, and then have the quality there for everything, have a Vol Reave. It'll just be your comfy end game gem. And then you can come up here, you can grab melding if you want. You can kind of take whatever ascendancy nodes you want in whatever order. One thing to note is that for your Uber Lab on League Start, I would say one step ahead. These nodes both are going to give you around the same amount of attack rate, so you can see that this gives me 0.3 attack rate and this gives me 0.23 attack rate. Depending on your scaling and your investment, it flushes out to be around the same in terms of the attack speed increase. This does give you 4% attack and cast speed, so the additional modifier of having additional speed makes up for it the more attack speed you get into the build and the faster that you are moving. Additionally, this will prevent you from getting frozen. Depending on how the evasion and ES flushes out, you may even potentially just want to drop Escape Artist altogether, stay with one step ahead, and do Heartstopper, because even with a build like this, as you can tell, I have 1.2k ES. That's like enough to take like a decent beating, and then 16k evasion with the Ghost Dance's recovery mechanic allows you to kind of like take a hit here and there on your ES and not really be too terrified of dying. And then while mapping, polymath will just keep you topped up. So whichever way you really want to play it is up to you. I don't really care. I'll be trying out the Soul Drinker tech and trying to get as much of a hybrid pool as possible and seeing how that goes. That's going to be my intention, but I will most likely also just take one step ahead early on, because freeze immunity is nice. You cannot be frozen, you cannot be chilled while you have one step ahead. So it just means that you need to worry about shock and ignite. So that's something to consider. And then the mapping with precise technique, this is still, you can use a sword, you can use a dagger, you can use a claw, it doesn't matter. If you're staying frost blades, you can even use an axe. Actually, this node should be unchecked, because at this point you would be using fully converted Reave with either the Fizz converted to cold and Fizz converted to lightning, or like basically any setup that you can get to where it ends up flushing out to be a benefit. If you do take this cold mastery, I wouldn't use hatred. I would instead just run like a haste or you can run a purity of elements to just make mapping comfier. Additionally, you don't have to do the Herald of Purity tech. So Herald of Purity, Guardian's Blessing, and then I have it disabled, but the reservation stays the same. So this would just allow you to have an aura that gets put on your Herald of Purity. Herald of Purity just automatically summons as you are mapping, so it's going to be constantly up. It doesn't really fall off as a melee build. This might get nerfed before League launch because I don't think Grinding Gear really remembered that this was technology that existed. Not a lot of players took advantage of it because the socket congestion from having totems. The totems were just such a better damage multiplier, so a lot of people didn't really mess with anything like this. But I see it becoming very common tech in 3.25. So additionally, this build, if you're staying precise technique and using whatever weapon you can pick up off the floor, you can take the retaliation because this will just give you generic attack speed, and vengeance, this will give you rage. The little bit of strength is also nice while getting a character up in line, and then you don't have any like commitment to crit, so you can use, instead of this elemental mastery, you can just use like a curse, so like frostbite or elemental weakness, and just have a good damage spread, or you can use punishment and then really like kill anything that's like lower HP. My personal preference would be towards frostbite, just because you would have the ability to consistently freeze while mapping, well, inconsistently freeze while mapping against bosses. So that's my own recommendation. Additionally, if you need more accuracy, come over here, take Weathered Hunter. With respecs costing gold, I expect people to play a lot of builds that just kind of take fluff points while leveling and then respecking at a later date. I think precise technique with the rage tech is going to be really, really good for leveling, especially for any build on this area of the tree. I can't emphasize that enough. I think it's really, really, really good. Let's get into the Dagger endgame, Claw endgame comparison. So I will disable the Diamond Flask for the sake of discussion about the natural crit that you can obtain. This is using what I would expect to have even as an SSF player by the end of like week 1. This is very, very, very obtainable. This is the base crit chance that you will expect to see in 3.25 with an attack speed roll and a just well-rolled physical and elemental damage ambusher. There's also a claw with very comparable stats. They're both doing about the same amount of damage. And then obviously I have the more like mirror tier stuff as well. But we'll get into all the comparisons here. For the Dagger setup, allegedly, according to Zizaran, the Vol Soul Gain lockout is going to be on Daggers. That's what he said in the Max Roll, whatever it's called, the Max Roll podcast thing that happened. And I do think he is right on that assumption. I think Daggers are the ideal base. If it's on Claws, we are so cooked. Like, you give Claws basically the same amount of power that you gave Daggers, which is just insane. Daggers are already, I think, a little bit behind in terms of bossing, but both Daggers and Claws have their pros and cons. The biggest thing for Daggers is this node here, 100% increased critical strike chance against enemies that are on full life. Even with a base crit ambusher in 3.25, we are at 81%, and that is without Assassin's Mark on, it's 72%. With Assassin's Mark on and the full life not on, it's 71%. With a Diamond Flask on, this basically all stays around 80%, no matter which way you swing it. So for the sake of consistency, Daggers are a lot higher than Claws, and if you go towards like a mirror tier Dagger, this is just with Assassin's Mark and we're at 84%, And if you factor in full life and no ass mark, we're at 87%. And if you put in a diamond flask, we're basically like crit capped without using Assassin's Mark. So if we factor in Assassin's Mark and they are not on full life, we are almost crit capped still. So no matter which way you swing it, the Dagger variant just comes out ahead on the crit rate. And if it has the soul lockout prevention, you're basically just going to be playing Vol Reave your entire screen simulator for like your entire time while mapping, which is going to be insanely comfy. The perks of having the high crit chance is your upfront damage is going to be enough to just like, especially with Vol Reave, it's going to be enough to just like one shot, like even some rares in some scenarios. And then the overkill damage from your Herald of Ash will help clear as well against the tankier rares. Yeah, Herald of Ash. So that's what I would recommend doing for daggers. And then we'll get into the claw discussion here. This is simulating the base crit chance to that claws received that I think is unwarranted. I do not think claws should be getting base crit improvements. I think they should stay the same. I think claws are fine. I think they are literally coping out their ass to buff claws the way that they have, because it's quite comparable to daggers, and it actually beats out daggers in the like super end game, just because of the attack speed modifiers and everything else that you can get on a claw. So real quick, we'll talk about the claw crit and the quality of life of claws. Now, I did change the pathing just to save a couple of points. You could pad this way, but you lose attack speed and accuracy with this node, and I think this is just more efficient. And it opens up the realm for cluster jewels, which is already better scaling than what the daggers would have access to. Your EES would be lower, so if you wanted to drop the escape artist tech and just use the Heartstopper and one step ahead, I would not doubt you. I think that's a fine conscious decision to make. Of course, you can take my recommendations for how to play Reave in 3.25 with your own interpretation. This is not like a lot of people, they try to sell you off on like, this is my build. This is just an archetype explained to a lot of people that are hyped to play a quote-unquote melee skill in 3.25 that essentially plays like a bow skill, because you just cover your entire fucking screen. So yeah, let's get into the crit rate comparison here. So we are set up for, where is it? Assassin's Mark. We're sitting at 73% crit chance, and that is with the base crit, and with a more mirror tier claw, what I would expect people to have on the higher end, you're at 84%. When you take in consideration that you don't have Assassin's Mark, it drops down to 74% while mapping. And if you use it just a base crit roll, because obviously getting crit chance as a suffix in addition to other good modifiers within the first week is going to be a little bit difficult. You're looking at 64% crit chance. And if you're dropping like the power charge and the accuracy and everything else like that, because you're not level 100, obviously, you're going to be looking at a much lower crit chance while mapping. So these are things to consider when you are playing a crit build, especially in 3.25. And this is with a diamond flask. If you don't have your diamond flask up, you have 48% crit chance. Like, it's comfortable enough if you're playing a multi-strike setup, but if you're like trying to just do what I want to do in 3.25 with the dagger setup and just running enough damage support gems that all affect your Vol Reave, then you're gonna not have as comfortable of a Vol Reave. Now onto the discussion of some of the lost power from the precise technique wheel setup. Obviously we had rage coming from Vengeance. I would recommend anointing Veteran's Wrath. This does cost 2 gold and 1 violet. So basically you got to spend like a day or two farming Blight. There's the new node that allows, it's a wheel, top left of the Atlas. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. but it gives you a percent chance to have maps that spawn in your map after you've cleared the blight in the map to spawn as blighted maps. I plan on picking that up with the base blight chance, and then or if I get like any blight scarabs or anything to guarantee blight in my maps, going about that to drop more blighted maps and then run those blighted maps and try to get golden oils. Golden oils are from T13 and above, and if you do drop like blight maps, they are a good source of like currency. They're a good source of a lot of just like random base types, higher level base types, fractured items, stuff like that. So it's pretty good on a league start from an SSF player's perspective, but this is what I would recommend in order to get Rage back into the build. Any build that's a right hand side tree of the build, right hand side tree or top tree is basically just going to be anointing, I think, at least Veteran's Wrath, because this Rage is being changed to start the degeneration effect or lose Rage after 2 seconds of not being hit or hitting anything. So what this means is that you're basically gaining 50% inherent Rage loss, and then you gain 2 rage on melee hits. So it takes 7.5 seconds to get 30 rage, and then it will take you 3 seconds, so you can be in and out of combat over the course of like 10 seconds and you won't have any rage downtime. So I just think Veteran's Wrath is really good. It allows a build like mine to basically just get 30% more damage on an anoint while mapping, and that's just in general goodness. Like 30% more is literally the amount of damage that I'm gaining from polymath. So polymath is insane, but you combine that in conjunction with that, and that's just where a lot of the damage is coming from in a build like this. What was the other thing that I want to discuss about? Oh yeah, refraction. The reason why I do not want to use refraction is because it does not convert the vol skill. The vol skill with the soul gain prevention, if it is on daggers like I am assuming and predicting, just like Scissorin is, you're kind of just inting. The vol Reave already hits so hard if you're playing even just the base physical damage of the weapon. Even if you're playing a flat elemental hit, you will want to probably convert some of that physical at least, or get cannot take like reflected through awakened elemental damage with attacks. But even this is just limited to elemental. It's not going to cover the physical, and I think that the reflect, being able to run reflect maps, at least as an SSF player, is a huge benefit. Obviously you don't have to do it, but they are putting the quality to affect the physical as a more multiplier. So the physical on every weapon regardless is going to be going up slightly, and then the damage effectiveness from that small physical node is basically getting doubled. So you will not be able to run reflect at all. Any physical reflect maps, just not at all. I think it's fine for the application of like other ascendancies, like Warden or anything like that, but you're not going to get as defensive and like the quality of life. So if you run like an Enduring Cry, you just need to press it like every like couple of seconds. You're not really using it for the regen, you're just using it for the endurance charges while mapping. So there's just a lot of things that I think are just more beneficial to use as a Trickster over a Warden. Additionally, Warden, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of like the shock node. You're not shotgunning a lot of hits, you're just having a lot of upfront damage. For the sake of Oath of Summer, I do think that Oath of Summer, while mapping on like a lower end budget, or like let's say you have an Orabot, that's very good. And then Oath of Winter is clearly very powerful, and Avatar of the Wilds is very powerful. And onto the discussion of Tinctures. Tinctures have a mana burn rate, and essentially it's going to degrade like a small percentage, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% of your mana over the course of like a second. And it ticks up, so I think it was every 0.7 seconds the mana burn stacks again. If you want to fit mana burn into a build like this, for the daggers, you could honestly just drop some of like the crit chance stuff, you'd be fine. Or if you have enough life rolls and everything, you can drop melding entirely, and then come over here, take one of either this tincture wheel or this tincture wheel, and then the first 6 mana burn applied to you have no effect. And that, in conjunction with the polymath recovering like 13% or whatever ridiculous percentage of your mana pool, is going to keep you topped up while mapping. And then for the sake of discussion in regards to like bossing, I'm going to use Shaper as an example, but with tinctures where flasks do not have this benefit, flasks, you cannot disable them during a boss fight for like relying on phases. So for example, with Shaper, let's say he goes into a beam phase, you are, or like he does a slam and then like teleports into a beam phase. That entire time you're trying to like damage the boss, you'll be fine with like a tincture wheel, and the first 6 mana burn applied to you have no effect. So you just keep hitting the boss, and then you will eventually run into a time frame where the boss becomes untargetable, whether he goes then into the like bullet hell phase or he goes into a add phase. You can basically depress or press the tincture again, turn it off, and then it has a cooldown where it's 8 seconds of no tincture, and then it comes off cooldown, and then you can use it again while fighting the boss. So even if you were to go in and fight Shaper, and he is, what is it called? He goes immediately into the bullet phase, but you had your tincture active regardless. You can just deactivate it, and then it should be up or just about to be up immediately after the bullet hell phase. So I think there's a good chance that tinctures are a lot better than some people are kind of talking about and discussing in their own videos, but that's just me and my perspectives of tinctures. Additionally, I would like to add, just like the other video that I had about my thoughts on like a warden and everything else, the showcase that they have had on tinctures, they're not showing the highest tier rolls, they're also not showing uniques. I do expect them to kind of tease more of the tincture stuff later on this week, but I expect the attack speed rolls to be like pretty high. I expect the elemental penetration to be pretty high on tinctures, just because the trade-off of costing mana and having to spec points into tinctures makes them incredibly powerful. Additionally, I think they want people to not use mage blood and like headhunter as often as they have been for a lot of generic content. So I think having tinctures and having a reason to use a tincture for a lot of builds over just get as defensive as possible with a mage blood is kind of their angle here, because it does make the rare belt slot a bit more competitive if you don't have mana flasks, or not mana flasks, like generic flasks at all. So I think having Warden exist with the double tincture stuff, and I think having tinctures added into the base game is a pretty big benefit. Obviously it's quite jarring at the initial perspective of having to like micromanage like your mana and everything else like that. I know a lot of people are upset with like being a left-hand side tree build and having to like pick up like things like cannibalistic right and other stuff like that. I understand that perspective, but for me it's not necessarily a huge concern. People will figure out different ways to play around things. It's always been the case. I will probably like life tap movement abilities because we have extra sockets now as a melee character, so life tapping that is fine with me. Having the like guardian blessing support for Herald of Purity, granted there's a chance that they just completely gut this with Herald of Purity before the league even launches, because I've seen a lot more people talking about this tech. So yeah, they open up socket pressure, and they've now reintroduced pressure in other areas for you to build around. I think it's fine. A lot of people are getting a bit butthurt about things. I think it's nice not having to care as much about having grace determination in every build. I embrace these changes. I know a lot of people are resilient to change, but that's it. Take with all the information that I've provided here with your own interpretation, and good luck in 3.25. See you in the next one. Peace.